Welcome to this series on enduring value, fundamental truths of resource planning, where Tom and I discuss various aspects from ancient wisdom. Discerning demands. This is a topic close to both of our hearts, and this is something we as leaders walk through day in and day out. We get flooded with a lot of information. We have to filter noise to the real ones, and also with the choices that we make with our demands, because everything demands our time and attention.
And I like the way you said it demands on time and attention. I've kind of gone through a decade by decade series of refining my own word choices here. It seemed early in my career that the only resource that was heavily constrained was my money, and then that's terrible, right? When you can't afford. And there was actually one time that we ran out of milk, and I had a 2-year-old son, and we didn't have enough milk in the refrigerator. And it just so happened that a rebate check came in the mail that day for $2, which way back then was enough to go buy a gallon of milk. So I don't want to minimize the urgency of the physical demands and the constraints of finance, but things have a way of moving up the pyramid, if you want to use Dr. Maslow's example. And if your basic needs are met, well, that doesn't mean all of your needs are met. You start paying attention to different levels of your own needs and the needs of people around you. And one of the things that I think surprises a lot of us is that the older you get, the more experienced, seasoned, perhaps wise in some people's perspectives, the demands increase and the types of demands increase. And I think there is always a danger of when you're just trying to become valuable, you can create dependency. And you can love creating dependency. You can become codependent. You can fall in love with the idea of being essential to people, and that's a trap, very much to avoid. But then you start, when we get even older, when the beard turns gray, then the constraints change. And first the constraint was money, and then the constraint was time, and then the constraint became energy. And now I think probably the most significant constraint, very literally, is attention. I only have enough bandwidth to truly pay attention to a small number of things. I do understand that younger minds are much more supple and much more capable of taking in multiple sensory inputs, but I'll never forget the first time I watched, I think it was CNN, and this was maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And I think they were the first one to pioneer the television screen that had 8 things going on at once. The banner across the bottom, the left or the right corner. And that was just sensory overload for me. I would prefer to focus on one thing at a time. And people even started doing the larger video screens and the split screen and the quad screen. What am I supposed to be paying attention to? All of it. Not really. Not really. You don't. I remember a fellow from IBM back when some of the earlier computers were starting to talk about multiprocessing. And he said in many cases, most cases at that age, multiprocessing, or the human version of that, multitasking, is a myth. We don't do 2 things at once. He said what we do instead is we time slice. We give half a second of our attention here, and then half a second of our attention here, and hope by the time we get back here we haven't missed anything. But I was working with a guy in Mississippi, very much in demand, very talented individual. He would attend 4 conferences at once, one on his desktop computer, one on his laptop computer, one on his phone, and I don't even remember what device else it was, but he had them all on mute, and he was trying to pay enough attention to unmute and chime in when needed. And these days, I think a lot of people experience, the Zoom calls or even the in-person meetings, where an awful lot of people are on their phones and they have their laptops and they're responding to text messages and instant messages of all kinds. And it's just, that is a divided attention. That is sliced attention. It's not full attention. And I'll be honest enough, right? I use my phone while driving on occasion. I feel like I can drive effectively with less than full attention. But so much of human relationship really needs full, undivided attention. And the more difficult the problems become, the more, toes to toes, knees to knees, eyeball to eyeball attention is needed. And I think I imagine you're noticing the same trend that the work from home took off, and now you're seeing a lot of the counter movements of the return to the office, because people have noticed something has eroded with that loss of eye-to-eye contact, true body language, being present with each other in the room, and just having a more full contextual sense of each other. But I still think it's not just age that limits our ability to focus. I think sometimes it matures our willingness to focus on one grandchild at a time, on one problem at a time, at one demand at a time. And so I really think the competition for your attention, your full undivided, are you really paying attention to what I am telling you? That's becoming harder and harder. And I know a lot of people deal with that by occasionally unplugging from technology to get rid of the noise, to get rid of the distractions. And yes, I have a screened-in deck out back where I can turn off all the technology and just go out, and what I'm listening to is the wind blow through the trees, and what I'm watching are the birds, or perhaps the deer walking through the yard. And that is more than enough to warrant my full and undivided and focused attention. And I think that discerning signal and noise from the people that are demanding your attention from every angle, it's a difficult thing to get to, because there's such a fear of not hearing something, not seeing something, not knowing something, a fear of missing out in the sense of information. But learning to filter out the unimportant, to decide what's unimportant, it is a very significant part. A long time ago, when my middle son was choosing a college, I took him to the college I went to, which is Wake Forest University, North Carolina. And he and his friends were very interested in the biology and chemistry science labs. And we just happened to run into a gentleman who was kind enough to show us their brand new laser. They had this whole room built. And he said, when that laser was running, it consumed more energy for that brief millisecond than the rest of the state of North Carolina put together. But the focused energy is what we're learning so much more about, the power of directed energy. And I think we need to learn to apply that to ourselves, to focus our energy, to direct our energy in ways that are just extremely effective, even if in short bursts, rather than continuing to work on our juggling ability. I can juggle 3 tennis balls for 5 seconds. That's about it.
And this is interesting, right? So I follow a guy who writes on deep work. So he talks about multitasking is not necessarily productive, same as what we talk about. And multitasking is not necessarily multitasking. It's brain paying attention to different things at the same time. As a result, the attention span plus the amount of focus that we give to each topic becomes less and less. So it's actually doing injustice. It's counterproductive in many cases. And then he proves that, and he proves that with a lot of evidence.
I've seen neurological studies that talk about the time, indiscernible in a sense, but if measured, and it is measurable, the time of transition between one thought and the next is a loss of efficiency. And we're
Yeah.
so used to that in manufacturing, right? You set up a lathe for a particular process. Somebody comes up and says, I got a more important job. Well, of course, it's going to take time to reset the
Mm.
lathe for the new process and move all the materials around. And so that, you know, that breakdown in setup time, there's a mental counterpart to that. You know, wait a minute, I was thinking about this, and now I have to spin down, refocus, figure out the context, and spin back up. You lose an awful lot of
Oh, yeah.
energy
Mm.
in constantly shifting your focus.
Yeah.
You'll even notice it. I don't, you may not be old enough, but even in your eyes, they don't
Oh, yeah.
refocus as quickly when you're older as they did when you're younger, you know, walking indoors, outdoors. But giving yourself time to refocus and then intensely focus is a very important part of the discernment of where is your attention most needed.
E- Exactly right. So that brings us to this beautiful topic of discerning what gets our attention. So,
Right.
especially in the world where we are dealing with a lot of noise. So, for example, as a president of your company, you will have a lot of noise to deal with. So, to start with, your email is going to be full. The list of papers you're going to sign is going to be full, and also there'll be multiple screaming problems at any point in time. And that it kind of like you know, you've lived it, you've experienced it, and you you would have developed traits, or you would have developed techniques over time to be able to manage that. And discernment is a value that comes with it, isn't it?
I, I agree completely, and I think it's a very difficult thing to teach anybody else or even explain to anybody else. You know, what is your method? What is your process? I used, you know, I've used all kinds of different lists and schedules and calendaring events and everything, but there's a part of it that is just getting to know yourself very well. You know, when I make lists, the lists themselves become impressive to me. And one of the things I really don't like is this internal sense that if I have written it down on a list, that process of writing it down makes it more important than the thing I haven't written down, which is false.
Mm.
It's
The
just
false
not
priority.
true, because some of the most important things in my life are never going to show up on a list of things to do today.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if my wife's going to get sick. I don't know if I'm going to get a flat tire, you know. Well, no, I got to
Yeah.
pay more attention to the things I wrote down. No, you know, be flexible enough to understand that the thing that is unwritten, the thing that is unplanned, might need to interrupt and intervene. Um, I remember one of the toughest things for me, as young and still, I think, difficult, is this sense that if I am needed, then I must prioritize that somebody else's need becomes my obligation. And Jesus instructed his disciples in a very unorthodox and surprising way, you know, that when you're going out among the countryside to teach and to help and to heal, if you are not well received, leave town,
Leave town. Yeah.
walk away, and shake the dust off your feet when you leave. And that image is the one that I think is the most
Mm.
important, because so many people, when they do walk away, they walk away apologetically, carrying guilt and a feeling that I have let you down, I have disappointed you. You asked me to do something for you. I wanted to, I found myself unable, and I feel less. And so that's the dust that gathers on your feet when you are unable to do what others demand of you. Not, you know, one of the things I've written down to remind myself is, you know, regularly resign from all the jobs you never accepted in the first place.
Mm.
Don't allow the urgency of others' demands, or the apparent urgency of others' demands, to become your primary system of prioritizing and focusing your own energy. Sometimes it's not the right fit. It's not your battle. It's not your job. It's not your task, not your calling. and you have to
And
walk away without the dust.
and that is again beautiful words of wisdom, right? Walking away, or knowing when to walk away is a gift in itself. And this applies to businesses and many other scenarios in life. Like, not all supplier relationships are the right ones. We may have to
Right.
walk away from some of the relationships, and some
Exactly.
vendors made up deadlines, all that stuff. So sometimes we may have to qualify and choose which one to engage, which one not to engage on, which one to be threatened by, because there is
Exactly.
always, as you say, like competing demands to compete, everything that competes for your attention and
Right.
resources.
Right.
Yeah.
I've even had one of my own board members say to me before, never turn down work. And I just looked at him and, tried to very respectfully say, I disagree.
Yeah.
I need to turn down work that is not well suited, that is not well timed, because the alternative is to just, to become pure sales, purely focused on the
Oh,
booking, and say, yes, I can do anything. I can do everything. Matter of fact, in my younger years, I would sometimes say sleep is optional. When do you need it? Because I was so energized to please. And I think a
mm,
lot of people just that a lot of entrepreneurs are internally driven by a desire to please. And so it's not that I didn't know how to say no. I've always been quite good at it. It's just I kept choosing not to because the deeper desire was to please everyone. And by doing that, you end up displeasing everyone. You, I think most people would rather hear, that I, I am not able to take on that job rather than, yes, I'll get to it as soon as I can. I'll be there tomorrow morning. And then you get a call at 1 o'clock. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it today. It'll be next Wednesday. And then, quit that. Just,
mm,
just quit that endless cycle of stringing people along and know yourself well enough to know your limitations and turn down the work that isn't a good fit without the guilt.
yeah, and the world would be a much better place when we follow these basic principles, right? So you work with people who are compatible. I'm not saying, we shouldn't be pushing boundaries or testing new relationships or anything like that, but it's a careful choice on, you know, I'm going to do X and with this group of people, and this is the purpose. I'm clear on my purpose, I'm clear on my tribe, and I know who to engage, who I work with, and who I serve. So,
Mhm.
very fundamental ancient principles. So, it
Absolutely.
always
And
takes
it
us back
can
to the
change. It
basics.
can
Yeah.
be dynamic. You
Mm,
can finish your
mm,
business with one
yeah.
client, with one project, and then move on to the next, move on to the next town, move on to the next project. But I kind of hate I think the building industry has really gotten a bad reputation for trying to keep 12 customers happy at once by lying to all of them equally. Right. As long as I don't lie to you more than I lied to the other guy, then we're okay. It's like, that doesn't have to happen. You can keep your promises within the limits of your
Mm,
own capacity and your own behavior. And I think most people will respect the honesty and integrity that comes with that.
mm,
That when you do say, I'll have it done today, Lord willing and the creek don't rise is what we say in East Tennessee. If no crisis occurs, that they can count on that and that you're not
mm.
just making that up to make them feel better. I think it's even
And
a good sales technique.
yeah, and being discerning also develops meaningful relationships. So if we look
Mhm,
at the trading relationships over history throughout the years that have existed, they have made discerning decisions over time. And these
mhm,
decisions could be validated by results, being available, to being there when times are tough. Like, not
mhm,
everything goes to plan, not everything goes, life is not a fairy tale, or as my
mhm.
daughter would call it, not all fairy tales have to have a perfect ending. And don't
Yeah.
talk about
and just your choice of words, the phrasing, it
Mm.
reminded me of a friend I had many years ago. We were both young, and he was the production manager for a small company, and a close friend of his, and was the sales manager for that same company. But they divided their roles that way in a way that wasn't as integrated as it needed to be, because the salesperson felt like it was his job to get as many sales as possible by promising as much as he could promise, and then throw it over the fence of the production guy who would tell him,
Ooh.
I can't do that. You've sold
Mm.
more than I can produce. Oh, they'll be fine. And it wasn't fine. And it created
Yeah.
tension between the two of them throughout the company. It's just a bad way to work. But that was an early conversation. Now I've seen that replayed in businesses of all sizes, where those who are driven by bookings, by cash flow, just they want that
Mm.
type of contract signed. They'll make any promise. I even had a member of my own congregation tell me one time, just private, he was a salesperson. He said, you can't succeed in sales without lying to everybody. And just,
Okay.
I, I've met a lot of people that actually believe that. I don't. I'm not sure what the
Mm.
percentages are, but I've certainly been lied to, right? I know
Mm.
what that
Oh,
end of it feels like. But you do have to know your own capacity, the capacity of your team, the capacity of your company to to maintain your integrity on balancing the which demands you are willing to commit to, and which
mm.
ones you say with integrity and honesty, no, I am not able to do that. Here is what I can do. If that's not good enough, I know some other people that you might want to talk to.
And this is interesting, right? So I was reading about the transformation failure rate in my industry. It's extremely high at the moment. It's
Mhm.
70%. So sometimes I wonder what qualifies a failure. Like, is it because the program didn't get off the ground, or did it not meet the objectives, or so many things? It's not defined clearly yet. But what was alarming was this behavior that you talked about, like promising the world when we know that the world that is promised is not necessarily in our control or in our
Right,
domain to promise. So
right.
sometimes the emerging technologies, the problem is much bigger than you know what what you and I or anyone listening to it can fathom. So it's like if we work with what we know, yes, we push our limits and extend our boundaries. That's absolutely fine. But we don't have to create a solution or hypothetical solution that doesn't exist and take an organization through a challenging transformation and leave them hanging there. It is
Exactly. And to
costing
leave them hanging, I
everybody.
think is one of the things that has just given our profession, our industry,
Yeah.
many a black eye, many a well-deserved black mark demerit.
Mm.
There was I won't name companies, but there was a major consulting firm that I worked alongside. I didn't work for them, I was companion. And they clearly had been taught to approach problems by gathering all of the requirements, gathering all the demands, putting them on a list, getting the client involved with prioritizing the list. And we are off and running, and we are not going to stop running until we run out of time or money, whichever comes first. And then we're done
Yeah.
and we've done our best. And it's like, no, they don't they apparently promise to get to everything, but I'm only human. I can only no, take more responsibility than that.
Mm.
Don't just say, yeah, at a time I gotta go, it's 4 o'clock, I gotta leave.
Mm.
That's a cop out, but it's a
Mm.
strategy I've seen used, sadly, effectively in transferring blame, in transferring responsibility to the client. Well, you didn't spec out your requirements. You didn't give me enough money. You didn't give me enough time. Not my fault, right?
Mm.
I'll just work until I'm done, and then it's your problem. It's like, no, it needs to be more connected to that than that, more relational than that, more, okay, let's talk about this. I think I can do this. I don't believe I can do that. Is that acceptable? And do we
Mm.
need to reschedule? Do we need to, there was a factory manager on one time, and this is a tolerance issue, right? How much is just a stretch goal,
Yeah.
and how much is just a lie?
Mm.
And this factory manager's first name was Larry. He always liked to give his production teams a goal that was 10% higher than what he really thought they could do. I I get that. I
Stretch
get
goal.
that
Yeah.
because sometimes
Mm.
you really do want to be reaching for that next 10%. But then, the next guy comes in and says, I want you to double your output.
Ah.
How? Well, we're going to set a plan. And the plan is this: you're going to improve by 10% every month for the next X months until you've doubled your output. That's the plan.
That's
That's
yeah. Yeah.
it's an absurd, unrealistic objective. And I think too many high level and mid level managers just take that customer demand and, use
Mm.
gravity and allow it to roll downhill, so that the person blamed for not being able to keep the promise is the person that wasn't able to work twice as hard. And
Yeah.
it's irresponsible in the mid levels to perform that way.
It's a very interesting thing that is seen in all industries, right? So I see this a lot in my industry, digital transformation. Yes, there is a lot driven by quotas and sales and
Mhm.
targets because investors are involved. There is big money involved in all that stuff. And as we look to what it has done to the industry,
Right.
so people take away it takes away the discerning nature, and people are chasing something very trivial. It could be money, or it could be a booking, it could be something even much more trivial than that for the sake of a tick box. And
Right.
we haven't stopped to see the challenge in the industry. That is, a lot of companies need to transform at the moment, and they do not know where to start, or they do not know where to go because there is a lot of lies in the market, and
Right.
also a lot of case studies on failure. They do not know what successes look like. So maybe
Exactly.
it's time for us to be discerning and look at what can we do to make things better. So what can we make, how can we make success the normal? Because we were at a period of time, like as humans, I think in the 40s or something, we were celebrating success. So
Mhm.
we embraced success, we grew with it. Yes, there was a lot of demand and all that stuff, but we grew as humans, we developed us. And now, that value is not necessarily coming out in us in any shape and form.
Right. One of the things I see, and I know that you and I read a lot of the same articles,
Mm.
and I think you're more vastly wide read than I am, but a trend I see emerging in many spheres is a widening gap between, I'll call it kind of a devil's triangle of the gap between what you want, what you need, and what you can afford. And when consultants and implementers and systems integrators and people who make their living by flying into town and helping you out and charging you a fortune and then leaving, going to the next customer, when they allow that gap to remain unclosed,
Mm.
when they allow it to remain open-ended and growing, then, and I'm going to sound real cynical about this because I am, um, then they pretend that the problem is change management, that you didn't have an
Oh.
authoritative enough leader to persuade the workers that they should be happy with what they got. Quit complaining that what we paid for wasn't either what you needed or what you wanted. just, same friend from Mississippi, would quote the old sad, dark saying, the flogging shall continue until morale improves. You are supposed to be happy with what we gave you. Why? If it isn't what I wanted and isn't what I needed, and you just, it got more expensive, and so you cut it at what you thought you could afford. Those decisions need to be made up front. I think I read an article recently, somebody talking about phase zero.
Yes, that is
Actually
yes.
think through the
Yeah.
implications. The Jesus parable analogy was, don't start building a house until you've figured out how much it's going to cost. My brother spent some time in the Dominican Republic in some very failed communities. And he said their politics were so strange that most of the building that happened in the community was driven by political power. And so if there was a change from one party to another, the new party had no desire to finish what the previous party had started. So there were unfinished buildings and projects and schools and hospitals all over the place. The new party wanted to start over and claim it for themselves. Don't start what you can't finish is, one of those things Dad tried to teach me as a child, and yet that's a much harder problem. But the gap widens, and it continues to widen. And I think, this is a stray thought that's been on my mind for a while, and I think it might connect here. There is a book I ran across many years ago, Generation to Generation, by a Rabbi Friedman, I think it was. And he talked about the importance in human relationship of discerning the difference between content and process. And the easiest way to kind of get at that distinction is that the symptom that somebody is complaining about is very rarely indicative of the process that's causing the symptom. And I think throughout, the pharmaceutical industry, certainly treating symptoms is extremely profitable. Figuring out root causes and actually assessing and repairing the malignant processes is time consuming and difficult and expensive, humanly expensive. And my own doctor told me that so many of his patients, he could tell them what you need to do is, lose 20 pounds and eat a healthier diet and exercise, get more fresh air. And they'll say, isn't there just a pill you can give me? And I think, we go for that easy solution, and we're not addressing the process issues. And I think that is true of the entire digital transformation industry, that we're addressing symptoms without doing the really hard work,
real groundwork
of addressing the process, which is often a malignant process itself. You are making people's lives worse, not better. You are making companies more fragile, not more robust, by your insistence on dramatic, radical change that they may or may not be ready for and may or may not need.
May or may not need, may or may not be ready, all those discerning decisions. So one thing I'm a big fan of, like this is something me and other colleagues in the digital transformation and with your support we are trying to do, is talk more about the phase zero, count the cost, sit down, understand and plan. And you may decide to walk away from that because that's a discerning decision you make. Like it may not be the thing that is right for you. And if it is the thing that is right for you, are you ready to do it? And when do you want to do it? So there could be so many combinations that we know we can do to, help things go along or make success the normal and all those good things. So this brings us to an important point, right? So we talk about in terms of an indicator for discernment is that a promise. So make sure the promise is not better than the behavior. So I like that quote of yours. So it is.
I really do think an awful lot of the things that we do poorly as people come from good intentions, but they're not adequately filtered by integrity, honesty, and maturity. Um, I want to do good, therefore I promise my parents I'll be better. I won't
Yeah.
do that again. I'll make better grades next semester. And sometimes we just don't ever outgrow that,
Mm.
right? Boss, give me another chance. I'll be better. Client, I'm sorry that project failed. Give me another chance. And so much of the emphasis is on the persuasion involved in the promise when in a longer term relationship, and that's another factor that goes in, right? You just too many transformations or short term relationships where they're going to forget your name 6 months from now. But if you're building the long term relationships, then a reputation is built with consistent behavior over time. You know, you don't need to pay too much attention to my words, watch my actions.
Yeah.
Look at my track
Mm.
record, and judge from there.
Mm.
You assess my capabilities. It's one of the things I love about the Olympics. I mean, just got to
Yeah.
tie that in, right? It's just there's not a whole lot of time wasted asking the athletes how confident they feel that they're going to win. That's just, yeah, it's occasional interview, but let's just watch. Let's watch the race and see, watch. And of course, they are mostly focused on improving their behavior, improving their performance. And I think it's difficult in the service industry to have that kind of tangible, visible look and see at what I have been able to do, produce, and behave. And so that leaves us open to the temptation to make it all talk,
Yeah.
all about
Mm.
persuasion, talk about how good I am rather than give me the challenge, let me produce, and then let's go from there. I'm a little bit off the charts on the
Mm.
incrementalist side. I
Yeah.
would really rather take a big project, turn it into little projects step by step. Let me do the first one for free. If
Yeah.
you're happy with my results, then let's talk about step two
Mm.
and then step three. I can lay out what I think the phases are going to
Yeah.
be, but let's take one step at a time. And at
That,
any
that,
point you're unhappy with my results, we'll part ways and
yeah.
we'll be fine. And
Mm.
you don't have to sign the lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to produce a revenue stream that's going to be, recurring
Mm.
revenue from each individual client. I joke with people, I've been trying to work myself out of a job for 30 years and failed miserably.
Yeah.
I get individual projects done, but then a satisfied client
Mm.
rewards you, right? Your reward for good
Rewarded
work.
for in different ways. Come back and
Exactly.
all that. Yeah.
And I love that.
Mm.
Now I'm at the point where I need to hire and train more people to take on that more work, but that's
It's a
the
different
best way to
discerning
grow.
challenge. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a better
Grow your
challenge to have,
reputation.
right? Yeah. Why not?
Exactly.
So that,
There was a Warren Buffett interview you may have
mm.
seen recently. I don't know. We talked about what his message to his leadership team is at the beginning of every
Mm.
year. And he said it's always the same. He said, we can afford to lose money.
Yeah.
There's a thousand other ways that we can make money. We
Mm.
cannot afford to lose our reputation.
Yeah.
It is almost impossible to build back once you lose it.
Yeah.
If I go to a restaurant and I get lousy service or lousy food, the odds of me returning to that restaurant are low.
Mm.
And I think we're still in some ways in the first full generation of
Yeah.
digital implementation in business.
Mm.
And so that true multi-generational loyalty, eh, we still got work to do. We
Yeah,
still
we've
got
got
a
work
lot
to
of
do
work
to
to
get
do.
achieve that. Yes. And
Right.
as we say, as industry, we have a lot to work on to improve, to be discerning about what we
Yes.
want to do and what we want
Right.
to take on as an industry and what
Hmm.
we want to achieve. So I was watching a video which explained that we are a generation which has 6 times more material stuff when compared to all the other generations put together. And you go,
Hmm.
Yeah, is that a fake demand that is created that somehow is fulfilled and now it's all becoming trash at the end of uh, somewhere? So did
It's
we create a different problem for us to solve? And is it a
I
problem worth having? Yeah.
yeah, I think it is so easy to fall in love with the shiny object, right?
Mm,
The nice car, the nice house. Pick your tangible, visible thing. And so I'm going to go way on a limb here
yeah.
because I don't have enough personal experience to know whether or not this is true. But I've been told by enough people that one of the most significant differences between Eastern and Western
Mm,
cultures is that Western cultures tend to think of tangible physical realities as real and things that are not visible and tangible, touch, feel, see,
mm,
five senses as imaginary, where the more ancient, more
yeah.
Eastern cultures tend to reverse that. That
Mm,
they see a desk and they know that that desk will someday be in a garbage heap or an incinerator or returned to dust to
yeah.
dust. And the enduring things are the invisible things, the things that truly last, that are truly worth investing heart and life. Where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. And I think that is one thing that the Western cultures, Western business desperately need to regain
Mm,
what they moved away from, in the sense of seeking things that are not this quarter's results, right? Not
yeah.
meeting this year's Christmas presents, but what can you invest yourself in that will outlive you? And I think I may have used this quote last time. I don't remember. It's
Yeah.
one of my favorites. Society improves when old men plant trees under whose shade they will not sit.
Yes.
When we invest ourselves in things that are going to last, and that does not exclude technology.
Yeah.
That's not a dichotomy.
Yeah.
It includes and incorporates, how does technology enrich and empower people in ways that last.
And this is something beautiful, right? Where East can learn from the West and the vice versa, investing things that is on intangible, like deciding on a supplier, not just based on the last quarter's result or 2 years results. It's based on real transactions, meeting them as humans, understanding their broken experience and their vulnerabilities and things that cannot be put into words, things that need to be felt, not
Yeah.
seen. So, or
I
definitely
mean,
not put in a box. Yeah.
right. When I despair, when I am
Mm,
tempted to despair, is when I feel like not just the word, but the concept of loyalty
mm,
is fading from our business vocabulary. There was a couple of situations that came up today where new problems have emerged with one client because they quit doing business with a small local business that they had been loyal
that they,
to and has been
mm,
loyal to them for 20 years for essentially bureaucratic reasons. The small
jeez.
business was not able to achieve the certification documents that were expected. And these are, the people that have been around for a while, these are
I
friends,
know
these are
them.
family that
Yeah.
you can count on. He'll work
Yeah.
overtime, he'll do whatever,
Mm,
but he didn't check all the boxes. And
okay.
we can't throw out
Mm,
the enduring, I think,
mm,
immeasurable values of trustworthiness and loyalty and integrity because it doesn't fit on the competitive
box.
procurement
Yeah.
form.
Mm.
Um, I know you can overdo it, but
Oh yeah. It's a fine balance and also being discerning on the balance that we need to make as business people to,
yes,
if we want to make a difference in our world,
right,
let's be discerning and do it, because we've tried the other way, like checking boxes way, and that
right,
hasn't gotten us anywhere. In some
right,
ways we have regressed as humans, so it comes back
exactly.
to, yeah.
And And I'm a little bit afraid. I mean, AI can go one of two ways, basically. It's kind of like, when you have kids, you're trying to figure out how they're going to turn out. Well, a lot of it has to do with what they are innately, but an awful lot of it has to do with how they're taught. And so I worry about how AI will be taught. What will it be taught? Will our different learning models learn the box checking, quantifiable, you're good, you're not good, social credit score, that whole way of oversimplifying every interaction, a transactional mechanistic way of understanding human relationships? Or can it be taught? And this is a giant question mark for me. I don't have an answer. Can a learning model, a language model, be taught to recognize loyalty, trustworthiness, integrity? It's hard enough to teach children those things. Can we see those things? For heaven's sakes, what must God be thinking when he looks down and wonders, when will they ever learn? It just does. I am sure Jesus himself looked at his 12 disciples and said, "Oh my,"
What are we gonna do?
So I imagine he feels that way about me more than once. But yeah, we do want to preserve what's best.
That is true, right? So we're almost at the end of the session. So we talk about what is important, that is transparent priorities, achievable objectives, and most importantly, humility in failure.
I think the transparent priorities is like at the bottom of that pyramid for me. I've worked with so many people that so clearly have some alternative agenda in mind, that what they say and what they mean are not the same thing. And so you have to do an awful lot of work to cut through the words to, okay, what's really going on in this dynamic, especially when that same person will say something different to a different audience. So that hidden agenda aspect of the way a lot of business works at multiple levels, right? We can say this to each other, but don't say it to the boss. We're going to be really careful about what goes up. If we can learn to be more transparent, to where we're consistent no matter who the audience is, then you can build upon that the kind of honesty that comes into setting objectives that are reasonable, achievable. Be honest about what can you do. Don't overpromise and don't overdemand. And so when you're able to state objectives that are challenging but not unrealistic, and still leave you time to breathe, leave you time to take a vacation, then the pinnacle of that, it's counterintuitive, but is the recognition that not everything you try is going to work. And if you punish failure, then you'll revert back to square one and you have to start over. Because when I tried to be honest with you about what I thought I could do, I'm trying to be transparent about my limitations. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to succeed. So what happens if I fail?
That's the recognizing value, right? So it's like, I believe I can do this. Can I do it? We don't know. You need to give it a try.
And if you're punished for trying and failing, then your behavior will change. But if you're rewarded for the attempt and encouraged to try again, I don't know if you've ever run across this, I'm not positive it's true. I've heard it enough times. The way they train dolphins to jump, have you ever heard this piece? Lay the bar at the bottom of the pool and they swim over it, give them a treat, and just raise the bar little by little. Well, that's the reward, right? And it is reward and reprimand, right? Balanced together. But it's not, doesn't have to be punitive when you fail to achieve the objective. It can be humble, it can be honest. I'm not saying everybody gets a trophy. I'm just saying
Yeah.
recognize the humanity that is built into failure and the need for continuing encouragement and education, enlightenment, and all of those things that support growth. I think we have to recognize that we, at any age, are still growing human beings who are gaining with each new challenge. So, don't pretend you succeeded when you didn't. Admit that you failed. I am preaching to myself right now. So these are words I need to hear. I hate failure, but I've got to learn to accept it, learn, grow, and continue. And I think again that sports is just absolutely full of that. And the people who give up too easily don't make it very long. So they're built on each other.
Yeah.
And I think the pinnacle is actually the brokenness. When you
Broken.
have failed
Yeah.
and it hurts,
Yeah.
and you know that you have let the people around you down, that scar becomes a part of your character. And it becomes a part of how your behavior changes in the future. My best friend, who I mentioned earlier when we were talking before the taping, Chuck used to tell me that he thought my biggest problem was that I didn't fail enough as a child. And that I was still in my 30s at that point, afraid to try things that might not work. Well, I've gotten better at failing. not, not on purpose, but I have tried more things that haven't worked and am willing to try more. And I sense that that's becoming a bigger part of who I am in an important way.
And that's beautiful. And that is beautiful, right? So, yes, we are approaching the end of the episode, and we talked about how being discerning, creates the gift in us, which helps us with lot more things in life. Being open, creating more success, and making us more human and being very fundamental. Though it's counterintuitive, knowing when to walk away gives you the gift of knowing you better. So, with this, Tom and I are signing off, and we'll see you in the next episode.